Your pantry might be stocked right now, and it still might not be able to feed your family through a real emergency. That's the uncomfortable truth most people never face until it's too late. You've got pans on the shelf, you've got a full freezer, but when the lights go out and the stove won't turn on, how many actual meals can you put together? How many of those meals will your family genuinely eat? Before August 15th, there are 6 specific shelf-stable foods worth picking up. Not because a shortage is guaranteed, not because panic is the right response, but because the way most pantries are built right now creates a false sense of security. Too many carbohydrates, too much protein locked inside a machine that needs electricity, too many ingredients that still depend on running water, fuel, and someone with the energy to cook. These 6 items don't just add more cans to the pile, they fill 6 real gaps. Together, they turn a disconnected collection of ingredients into a functioning system. One of them costs almost nothing and quietly improves hundreds of meals. The one at the top of the list moves your family's main protein source off the machine that needs electricity and onto a stable shelf. Let's go through all 6. 6. Canned tomatoes. Here's something most people don't think about when building a food supply. The problem isn't running out of calories. The problem is eating the same thing every single day until nobody wants to open another can. Imagine day 1 of a power outage. You open some canned chicken, add beans, serve it over white rice. Simple. Everyone eats it and moves on. Day 2 looks similar. That's fine. By day 3 or 4, something shifts. The food is still there, the calories haven't gone anywhere, but the child at the table starts asking if there's anything different tonight. The older adult eats more slowly. The person cooking stares at the same 3 ingredients and doesn't know how to make them feel like a different meal. When eating becomes a chore, people eat less even when there's plenty of food available. That gap between what's on the shelf and what actually gets eaten is where canned tomatoes do their quiet work. Tomatoes don't deliver a massive amount of calories on their own. They aren't your primary protein or your main fat source. What they do is connect separate ingredients into something that feels like a real dish. They bring mild acidity that cuts through the heaviness of canned meat. They make beans taste brighter and less earthy. The natural compounds in tomatoes add depth and savory richness without requiring a long list of spices. Rice and beans can keep a person fed, but add tomatoes, a bit of seasoning, and whatever protein you have available, and those same ingredients can become a thick stew, a hearty soup, or a rice dish with real sauce. The total amount of food barely changes. What changes is how the meal feels. Different formats serve different purposes. Diced tomatoes add texture to soups, stews, and bean dishes so everything doesn't end up soft and uniform. Tomato sauce creates a smooth base that works well with pasta or as a starting point for something heavier. Tomato paste is the most concentrated option. Just 1 or 2 tablespoons can change the color and flavor of an entire pot. Don't judge a can by its size. Judge it by how many meals it can improve. Now, here's something worth paying attention to before August 15th. The majority of processed tomatoes in the United States are grown in California. That concentration makes large-scale production efficient, but it also makes the supply sensitive to shifts in planted acreage, water availability, temperature during key growing periods, and the contracting decisions that happen between farmers and processing facilities. According to a USDA report from May of 2026, California processors were expected to contract for roughly 9.9 million tons of tomatoes. That figure sits around 11% below the final contracted amount from the previous year. Projected acreage was also expected to drop to approximately 185,000 acres. That doesn't mean canned tomatoes will become scarce, or that prices will definitely rise. Final production totals, current inventory levels, demand patterns, and decisions made at the processor level all play a role in what ends up on store shelves. But it does mean that shoppers shouldn't assume prices and availability will look exactly the same as they did last year. The August 15th date isn't a warning that tomatoes disappear after that point. It's a prompt to check your pantry now while there are still plenty of brand options, can sizes, and price points to choose from. The goal isn't to buy as much as possible. The goal is to buy what your family actually uses. When you're shopping, read the ingredient list. Some canned tomato products contain significant added sodium, sugar, or pre-mixed seasoning. Plain or lightly seasoned options tend to be more versatile because you can season them yourself to fit different recipes. Tomatoes are high in acid, which means they don't hold their peak quality as long as lower acid canned foods do. The USDA recommends using this category within roughly 12 to 18 months for best quality. That's a quality guideline, not a safety countdown. Rotate older tans to the front.
Use them in everyday cooking and replace them as you go. Don't use cans that are swollen, leaking, heavily rusted, or dented along the seams. If you're cooking without refrigeration, open only what your family can finish at one meal. Leaving tomato products in an opened can at room temperature doesn't extend their life and won't keep them safe. Canned tomatoes don't make your food supply bigger, they make what's already there work significantly better. But there will be moments when cooking itself isn't possible. When that happens, you need something that requires absolutely nothing before it can give your body energy. 5. Peanut butter. A power outage doesn't just take away your refrigerator, it takes away most of the ways you normally turn ingredients into food. The electric stove stops working. Clean water becomes something you conserve carefully for drinking and medication. Someone who has just dealt with storm cleanup, taken care of a family member, or managed unexpected problems around the house may not have the physical or mental energy left to cook anything at all. At that point, the value of food isn't just in the nutrition it contains, it's in how many steps stand between you and eating it. Peanut butter removes almost every one of those steps. No thawing, no water required, no fuel. You open the lid, you take a reasonable amount, and you eat it immediately. That simplicity is the entire point. Around 2 tablespoons of peanut butter provides roughly 190 calories along with fat and a meaningful amount of protein. A small portion can make a snack genuinely filling without requiring a large quantity. That matters because most emergency food supplies lean heavily on rice, pasta, oats, and crackers. Those foods provide carbohydrates, but they often lack a convenient source of fat. Canned meat adds protein, but is generally lean. Peanut butter fills that gap. Fat increases energy density and helps a person feel satisfied for longer. Don't just count the jars. Look at the serving size, the number of servings listed, the number of people in your household, and how often it will realistically be used. That calculation tells you how many times your supply actually becomes food versus how many times it just creates a feeling of comfort when you look at the shelf. Using it doesn't have to be complicated. Spread a thin layer on bread or crackers, stir it into oatmeal when you have a way to heat water, pair it with fruit your family already eats. And this matters more than most people realize. Only store products your family will actually accept. No matter what the nutrition facts say, peanut butter that nobody in the household likes is not an emergency food. A difficult day is not the moment to discover that an entire jar of something purchased in bulk gets rejected at the table. Peanut butter also works well in a go bag because it delivers significant energy in a compact, lightweight package. Plastic jars are less likely to break than glass. Individual single-serve packets are easy to portion and carry. For home storage, several smaller or medium jars are usually more practical than one oversized container. The price per ounce on a large jar may look attractive, but if the jar can't be finished before quality declines after opening, that calculation doesn't hold. Pay attention to the type you choose. The word natural on a label doesn't automatically mean it's a better fit for emergency storage. Natural peanut butter often separates, with oil rising to the top. That's normal and doesn't mean the product is bad, but storage instructions after opening can vary. Check whether the label allows room temperature storage once opened. If you're buying peanut butter specifically for situations where the power is out, choose a variety whose label explicitly supports that. For unopened jars, follow the quality date and keep them in a cool, dry location away from sunlight and heat. Rotate older jars to the front. Open the oldest one first before starting a new jar. A few important cautions. The thick texture of peanut butter can be difficult for some older adults or people who have trouble swallowing. Don't eat it by the spoonful if that's a concern. Spread it thin or mix it into food. More critically, peanuts are a major allergen. If anyone in your household has a peanut allergy, do not purchase this product simply because it appears on a preparedness list.
Sunflower seed butter can serve a similar purpose, but verify the ingredient list and any cross-contact warnings carefully. Families managing a severe food allergy should continue following that person's established avoidance plan without exception. Use clean, dry utensils every time you open the jar. Don't use the product if you notice a rancid smell, unusual color, or any sign of mold. Peanut butter is not a complete meal, but when cooking isn't an option, water needs to be preserved and everyone is exhausted, very few foods can deliver that much energy with that little effort. What peanut butter can't do is turn a small portion of meat into a full dinner for multiple people. That's a completely different challenge, and the next item on this list is built specifically to solve it. 4. Canned beans. Picture yourself standing at the meat counter holding a pound of ground beef. That's the amount your family usually buys for chili or a weekend dinner. You look at the price on the label and pause. In June of 2026, beef and veal prices in the United States were running roughly 11.8% higher compared to the same period the year before. For someone buying ground beef regularly, that number isn't abstract. It shows up in a specific moment at a specific counter when you have to decide whether to buy less, choose something different, or find a way to make what's in your hand go further. Canned beans solve that problem directly, not by removing meat from the equation entirely and not by pushing the family toward a completely different kind of dinner. Beans help a smaller amount of meat still do its job at the table. Instead of making 1 pound of ground beef carry an entire pot of chili by itself, you use the meat as the base and bring in kidney beans to expand the volume. The meat still shows up in every bowl, the chili still has its thickness and texture, it still feels like a complete meal. The same principle applies across a wide range of dishes. White beans help a small amount of chicken build a larger pot of soup. Black beans combined with meat, rice, and tomatoes stretch the number of servings without forcing a trip back to the store. Chickpeas can be added to curry or grain dishes without requiring another animal protein source. A reasonable question at this point is why not just store dried beans instead? They cost less per serving, they last a long time, and they provide solid plant-based protein and fiber. When water, fuel, and time are all available, dried beans are a genuinely good choice. But dried beans require soaking, extra water for cooking, fuel to run a heat source, and someone with enough energy to stay near the pot. On a normal day, that's just cooking. When water is limited, fuel needs to be conserved, or the person who usually handles dinner is sick or overwhelmed, each of those requirements becomes its own barrier. A bag of dried beans on the shelf doesn't automatically become a meal. A can of already cooked beans does. You can add them to soup or stew if you have heat. You can use them cold if you don't. That flexibility is what separates the two products. The higher price per can compared to dried beans doesn't just pay for the packaging, it pays for the water, time, and energy that went into cooking them before they were sealed. Dried beans and canned beans serve different purposes. Dried beans are suited to situations where the household can cook normally. Canned beans are the backup layer for days when that capability is no longer guaranteed. Which varieties you choose should match your family's actual cooking habits. Black beans work well with rice, tacos, and chili. Pinto beans are soft, versatile, and easy to mash. Kidney beans hold their texture well in soups and stews. Chickpeas work across curries, grain salads, and thicker dishes. You don't need every type. Buy what fits the meals your family already makes. A can that sits unopened because nobody knows how to use it doesn't improve your preparedness. When comparing products, don't look only at the total weight listed on the can. Check the number of servings, the sodium content, and the drained weight if the label includes it. A larger can with more liquid inside may not contain more actual beans than a smaller, denser one. If sodium management is a priority, look for reduced sodium varieties. When clean water is available, draining and rinsing beans removes a portion of the sodium. When water needs to be reserved for drinking, skip that step. Choose the right product from the start. Can size should match the number of people eating. Without refrigeration, open only what the meal requires. Don't use cans that are swollen, leaking, rusted, or dented along the seams. Follow the quality date. Keep older cans at the front of the shelf and reach for them first. The practical approach isn't to buy a case of the cheapest option. Choose 2 or 3 varieties your family already eat.
Work them into regular meals. Replace them as you use them. That rotation keeps the supply fresh and ensures nobody's eating something unfamiliar during an already difficult situation. Canned beans don't replace meat. They make a smaller amount of meat produce more meals, reduce the total resources needed to cook, and give your budget real flexibility when prices rise. But across all these dishes, rice, beans, soups, and canned meat, there's one foundational ingredient that affects almost everything. It costs almost nothing, and most people completely overlook it when thinking about preparedness. 3. Iodized salt. A container of iodized salt costs a few dollars. It takes up almost no space. It can affect hundreds of meals, and it's almost certainly the last item people think about when building a food supply. Most people check their rice supply. They count cans of meat, they add more beans to the cart. Then they assume the salt sitting beside the stove will always be there when they need it. It's too ordinary to feel like part of a plan. But the moment it's gone, its absence reaches across nearly everything on the shelf. Salt doesn't create new dishes, it makes existing dishes do their job. A small amount brings out the natural flavor of beans, it balances the acidity in tomatoes, it rounds out a pot of soup and helps rice pair better with whatever's served alongside it. After several days of eating stored food, this small difference becomes something people actually notice. A food supply can contain adequate calories and still feel like a punishment to eat. Salt doesn't fix the monotony entirely, but it makes basic foods significantly easier to get through. At almost zero cost, that's meaningful. The word iodized on the label matters more than most people realize. Iodine is an essential nutrient the body needs to produce thyroid hormones. For households that don't regularly eat fish, seafood, or other foods naturally high in iodine, iodized salt is one of the most accessible ways to maintain that intake in daily cooking. But not all salt contains iodine. Sea salt, kosher salt, pink salt, and specialty salts often don't include this added nutrient. Don't assume based on the name or the price. Look specifically for the word iodized on the packaging. Iodized salt is still salt. The presence of iodine doesn't mean using more of it is beneficial. People managing sodium intake or following specific dietary guidance from a healthcare provider should continue doing so. More salt doesn't make food safer. It doesn't preserve meat stored at the wrong temperature. It doesn't rescue food that has already spoiled. It doesn't make a swollen or leaking can safe to open. And it should never be mixed into a solution as a substitute for proper medical guidance on hydration or treatment. Different applications also require different types of salt. Iodized salt is excellent for everyday cooking, but certain fermentation or pickling methods call for specific varieties. In those cases, use a tested recipe and follow it precisely. Don't substitute salt types or estimate ratios on your own. When shopping for storage, distinguish between pure salt and seasoning blends. Garlic salt, herb salt, and pre-mixed seasoning products contain additional ingredients that behave differently over time. The storage properties that apply to pure sodium chloride don't automatically transfer to every product with the word salt in the name. Moisture and contamination are salt's main vulnerabilities. Divide your supply among several small, clean, dry, airtight containers. Store them somewhere elevated, away from the stove, dishwasher, or any area that regularly generates steam or humidity. Don't set cardboard packaging directly on concrete floors in a garage or storage room. Salt doesn't need oxygen absorbers because it doesn't contain the fats that turn rancid over time. Keeping it clean and dry is the primary goal. Iodine content can decline when salt is exposed to heat, light, or moisture over extended periods. Use older containers first and replace them according to the guidelines on the packaging. Before August 15th, you don't need to buy a case of salt. Check whether what you currently have is actually iodized, whether the amount fits your storage plan, and whether the packaging protects it from moisture. Salt is not special because it's hard to find. It's special because it's completely invisible until it's gone. One small container quietly affects rice, beans, tomatoes, meat, soup, and nearly every meal you're planning to serve. But salt only improves food that's already prepared. It doesn't generate the energy a family needs to function through several difficult days. The next item does exactly that, and it does it in a way that costs very little per serving while lasting an exceptionally long time on the shelf. 2. White rice. Here's a simple illustration of how rice works in
1 can of chicken provides protein for a modest number of servings. Put it on the table alone and it disappears quickly. Mix that chicken into a pot of rice and add beans or tomatoes, and suddenly you're feeding more people from the same can. That is rice's specific role in this system. It doesn't replace meat or beans. It spreads higher-cost proteins across more servings so your supply lasts longer. Canned beans also stretch a small amount of meat, but the two foods serve distinct functions. Beans add volume, fiber, and plant-based protein. Rice creates the carbohydrate base across which everything else gets distributed. A can of chicken becomes something served alongside rice, rather than a dish that has to carry the meal entirely on its own. Rice creates the foundation. Everything else builds on top of it. For most families, rice also carries a practical advantage beyond its caloric value. It has a low cost per serving. It pairs naturally with a wide range of savory foods. It can be cooked soft for older adults, served as the base beneath a soup or stew, or eaten with a small portion of protein and some sauce. It doesn't complete a nutritional picture on its own, but it creates the sense of a structured meal rather than a collection of opened cans placed next to each other. For long-term storage, white rice is generally more stable than brown rice. The outer bran and germ layers that remain in brown rice contain natural oils. Those fats provide real nutritional value, but they also make brown rice more prone to developing an off smell during extended storage, especially in warm environments. White rice has had most of those layers removed, which makes it considerably more stable over time. That's not a statement against brown rice. If your family prefers it and rotates it regularly, keep buying it. Just buy a reasonable amount and use it within a shorter window. The best food is always the kind your household knows how to cook and is genuinely willing to eat. Here's the part that matters most for planning. A bag of dry rice is not a bag of ready meals. Rice requires clean water, a functioning heat source, fuel, a pot, and time. If electricity is out and your stove runs on power, the rice on your shelf may exceed what you can actually cook. Before August 15th, the question isn't just how many pounds of rice do you have. The better question is, how many meals can your available water and fuel actually turn that rice into? Plan rice, water, and a safe heat source as a single system rather than 3 separate items. Follow all manufacturer safety instructions for whatever cooking equipment you use. Never bring fuel-burning equipment designed for outdoor use inside the home. Uncooked rice can remain stable for a long time when stored properly. Cooked rice is a different matter. It can harbor bacterial spores that survive the cooking process. If cooked rice sits at an unsafe temperature for too long, bacteria can multiply and produce toxins. Reheating doesn't always eliminate the risk those toxins represent. Don't rely on smell or appearance to evaluate rice that has been sitting out. If you cannot keep it consistently hot or cold, cook only what can be eaten at that meal and discard anything left outside safe temperature conditions for too long. This guidance is especially important for older adults, young children, and anyone with a compromised immune system. For uncooked rice in storage, the main threats are moisture, insects, and pests. Keep the bulk of your supply in sealed containers. Store a smaller working portion in a clean, airtight container for regular use. Mark the purchase date on packages. Keep them in a cool, dry location off the floor. Don't buy rice simply because a large bag appears on sale. Consider your household size, eating habits, available water, fuel capacity, and actual storage space. A smaller bag used consistently is more valuable than a large one sitting untouched in a corner, slowly absorbing moisture or waiting for conditions that never quite allow it to be cooked. Rice extends more expensive foods across more servings. It helps distribute protein across multiple organized meals instead of running through it too quickly. But rice and salt together still don't fill the protein requirement a body needs across several days of stress or disruption. The item at the top of this list addresses that gap directly, and it also exposes a false sense of security that exists in kitchens across the country. 1. Canned chicken. Open a well-stocked freezer and the feeling is immediate. Ground beef, multiple packages of chicken breasts, pork, sausage, everything packed in tightly. Your family has protein for weeks. So when you think about building a shelf-stable food supply, you focus on rice, pasta, oats, and crackers. Those are inexpensive, stack easily, and last a long time. The pantry keeps filling up, but almost all...
Here's the problem with that. A freezer is a machine. It requires electricity to stay cold. When the power stops, a countdown begins. The family has to minimize how often the door is opened, watch the internal temperature, and make difficult decisions about what to use before it becomes unsafe. The protein supply that was supposed to provide peace of mind has become a source of pressure and urgency instead. Canned chicken takes the top spot on this list because it does one thing no other item here does. It moves your family's main protein source off a machine that depends on the power grid and onto a stable shelf. No thawing required, no handling raw meat, no dedicated cutting board, no lengthy cleanup afterward. The chicken inside the can was cooked during the manufacturing process. Open an intact can and you have ready-to-use protein. It can be eaten as it is. It can be mixed into rice with beans and tomatoes. It can be added to soup or served with bread and crackers. 3 basic applications are enough to make one product useful across multiple different situations. And this value doesn't show up only during major emergencies. Think about an ordinary evening when you arrive home late. The person who usually cooks is occupied with a sick child, or everyone in the house is simply too tired to deal with raw meat. The food might be there, but the gap between ingredients and dinner is too wide for the energy available. Canned chicken closes that gap. Why chicken specifically rather than canned sardines or salmon?
Those options carry their own nutritional advantages, particularly in omega-3 fats, but they also have strong and distinctive smells, textures, and flavors that many households won't accept without hesitation. Chicken is familiar. It has a neutral flavor. It combines naturally with rice, beans, soup, tomatoes, and bread without requiring adjustment. Familiarity drives rotation. A product the family is willing to open regularly is a product that actually gets used and replaced, which is exactly how a food supply should function. Don't make purchasing decisions based only on the image on the label or the size of the can. Read the actual label. Check how many servings the can contains, how much protein each serving delivers, and what the sodium content is. A can that looks large at a glance may contain more liquid than expected. The net weight listed doesn't always reflect the amount of actual meat inside after draining. Package sizes we're thinking about separately. When refrigeration isn't available, a smaller can that feeds one meal is more practical than a large can that leaves food sitting out. Once a can is opened, the contents are no longer shelf-stable. Use everything immediately or refrigerate what remains and follow the manufacturer's guidance on how quickly it needs to be used. When organizing your supply, inspect every can. Don't use anything that is swollen, leaking, heavily rusted, or severely dented along the seams. Move cans with earlier dates to the front and reach for them first. Work canned chicken into your regular meal rotation, not just the emergency plan. Buy it, use it, replace it. That cycle is the only thing that keeps it fresh and useful when you actually need it. Ask yourself this question tonight. Does your household's protein supply depend almost entirely on the refrigerator and freezer? If the answer is yes, even a small number of cans sized appropriately for your family can fill a significant gap. Here's how the complete system works together. White rice provides the caloric foundation of each meal. Canned beans expand that foundation and stretch the meat further. Canned chicken delivers a familiar protein source that exists completely outside the freezer's dependency on electricity. Canned tomatoes and iodized salt make the food easier and more enjoyable to eat. Peanut butter provides dense energy during the moments when cooking isn't possible at all. A full freezer doesn't guarantee protein. It guarantees that protein is being maintained by a machine that requires continuous power to function. Real preparedness isn't about filling every empty space on a shelf. It's about identifying where your household is most dependent on a single system and placing a backup in position before that dependency becomes a crisis. The goal before August 15th isn't to buy more of everything. It's to look honestly at your pantry and identify which of these 6 roles is currently missing. Rice builds the base, beans stretch the meat, chicken stands independent of the freezer, tomatoes and salt make it all easier to eat, peanut butter carries you through the moments when nothing can be cooked at all. Tonight, open your pantry and ask yourself one specific question. How many complete, safe, nourishing meals that your family will actually finish can the food already on those shelves become? Which one of these 6 is your household missing right now?
Drop it in the comments. Someone else watching this might be overlooking the exact same gap, and your answer could be the thing that helps them catch it. If this gave you something useful, hit that like button and make sure you're following my channel so you don't miss what's coming next.